Well, welcome back, everybody, to Pivot Point of View. I'm Destry Millsap along with Becky Pearson. And today we have a very special guest. She's a psychologist and she speaks mostly to how to become resilient. That's just an amazing quality that in today's world can be so hard with everything coming against us. And she really speaks to this. She has a few books are out. She just come out with a new one, right? Step Away. And so we're going to talk about that and talk about her philosophy today. And I'm really excited. Just looking at her page, we spoke about this before we started recording. On her page, it says finding the extraordinary within the ordinary, and that just really spoke to me because everybody's looking for that one thing that's holding them back to unlock their true potential. And so hopefully we can learn more about that today. So, Dr. Kate, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is
Yes,
great.
absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to resilience. I understand that you had a medical condition when you were younger, required multiple surgeries, and that kind of started your journey toward the power of resilience.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. It's definitely the thing that I think served as a catalyst for me to really focus on how do we move through and beyond challenge, and how do we focus on the things that are possible for us beyond challenge. And so for me, it began when I was 4, diagnosed with this condition called hydrocephalus, where the cerebral spinal fluid isn't circulating as it should. And so pressure builds up on the brain, and really scary, obviously, for me as a 4 year old. How a 4 year old, I can't remember exactly how I was making sense of it, but for my parents, and took a while to figure out what was happening because imaging technology back in the mid 1970s wasn't what it is today. Um, but they figured out it was hydrocephalus, and hydrocephalus is managed with something called a shunt, which is the good news. So shunts are working, things are good, most likely. And bad news is shunts break. So that meant a lot of time in and out of the hospital, getting the shunt fixed as a kid, and coming back to school looking different, feeling different, and all of that. So definitely those early experiences were the catalyst for what I think pushed me in the direction of becoming a psychologist, understanding people at a deeper level. And yeah, the rest is history. And here I am.
What are some of the main points that if somebody is going through a tough time, no matter what it is, because even as athletes, like you're gonna have to do hard things, and life doesn't get easier. We just get better at doing hard stuff. And so, what are some of the things that you give people a foundation on how to become resilient in whatever it is that they're pursuing?
Yeah, that's such a great question and so important, right? And so the first thing that I work with folks on, whether they're parents, whether they're teenage athletes, I work a lot with teenage athletes, helping them to break through performance barriers and optimize whatever it is they're doing in their sport. First and foremost, really important to help folks modulate their stress response. So to show up each day as level as possible so that they're able to show up the way they want to, perform the way they want to. Because if we're showing up here consistently and a challenge or a stressor hits, we're going to escalate potentially to the point of shutdown. And that's not going to help any of us. So I always teach this technique called the relaxation response to whoever it is I'm working with to help them modulate that stress response. Super simple technique developed by a physician in Boston back in the 1970s, before this type of thing, stress management and such, was a thing, but he persevered. And all you do is come up with a word or a phrase that you find soothing in some way, and you breathe and have folks practice on either end of the day so they can start to integrate what this modulated stress response feels like. And then the cool thing is they can carry the technique around in their back pocket, say before a stressful conversation, before a test, parent might have a situation where a kid comes home and tells them that something that makes them angry or irritated, or maybe they, you know, had a small fender bender or something like that. The stressful moments that come up for all of us, you can kind of plug in that technique, level out, create space before responding in a way that you want to, as opposed to reacting.
I think it's very important to be able to get yourself back to baseline. So if you make one mistake, another mistake doesn't snowball into the next one. I mean, like in what we do in rodeo, say
Mhm.
you're a calf roper and you rope your calf, you flank, and you bobble your tie. And it can really throw you off if you don't know how to push through that and then not make another mistake and then miss your hui and then your calf get up and it can just snowball if you can't figure out even in the heat of the moment how to get back to that baseline.
100%. It's getting back to that baseline so that the mistakes that are inevitable don't snowball and just shut you down. So, in situations like that, kind of high intensity, really, you're roping a calf and something goes wrong, can really come back to baseline by getting that word in your head or your mind, the word or the phrase, and if you can do a little breathing at the same time, but you might be too the intensity might be a little bit high, but if you can get that anchor word in place, really helps one to get back to baseline, because that's the key, because otherwise that spiral almost becomes inevitable, and that's not the direction that we want people to go.
So how would a person choose an anchor word? Like give an example of an anchor word and what it could mean to somebody.
Yeah, so we don't want the word to be complicated. We don't want it to be to take too much attention away from just being that placeholder. So oftentimes folks come up with a word that might relate to their favorite place or their favorite color. I've got many folks who, do something like blue water or just blue, or maybe it's mountains, or maybe it's peace. You just want it to be something that has a touch of meaning, as a soothing kind of, something that becomes soothing, but you want it to be crisp and clear. So it can really be anything. There's certainly not a one size fits all.
Right. So, and everybody's different. Everybody has their own struggles, but what are some of the common things that you see in high level athletes that they struggle with mentally that holds them back from reaching their true potential?
Yeah, so perfectionism is huge. Wanting to show up as perfect, having really high expectations kind of attached to that perfectionism, right? High expectations of themselves. I have to perform in this certain way, and if I don't, I failed. That kind of a thing. So, like a little bit of black and white thinking around that. uh, Comparison to others in the sport, in the game that day, or in the sport in general, as opposed to focusing on what are the things, what is your own unique context as an athlete, and what are the things that you need to maximize your potential within that context. Because when we start looking outside of our context in terms of comparison and, I'm not good enough, et cetera, that can snowball as well.
Right. And so, I mean, the mind is the most powerful thing, and you have conversations with yourself throughout the day. And so hopefully they're good conversations and a lot of people have a lot of negative self-talk. And maybe they need to I was listening to Charlie Crawford on a podcast one day and he's like, once I heard that, I went and bought myself a beer to apologize for all the bad things I used to say to myself. And I think that that's kind of a common thing that people just really have bad self-talk.
How do you handle, as a parent, and my kids have done sports and rodeo, and especially rodeo, there's so much that is out of our control. And do you have some really good concrete advice for parents? Like, because, if the child goes out and their performance is not what they want, and they, of course, usually teenagers, and oh, it is the end of the world that they went out there and they tipped the barrel, or, whatever it was. Both of my girls were very hard on themselves. Um, so, do you have some good advice for parents, like the mental prep, the visualization ahead of time, other than the anchor word? And then, how, as a parent, how can we help our children grow that resilience, give them the 5 minutes to throw their sucker in the dirt, but then move on like, okay, this is what I always tried to do is like a little coaching sandwich. Like, this went well. Next time you need to work on this, and you know, remember that these were the good things that came of that run. Do you have some advice, like a little system that parents could follow to help their children prior to and after competition?
Yeah, that's a great question and an important question, right? And so, first thing, and I know we've already talked about this, is as a parent watching a competition, really making sure that we have our stress response dialed in and it's modulated so that we're not showing up in sort of a reactive place of like, oh my gosh, that went terribly. What happened? What happened? We don't want to show up with that kind of energy. We want to be there as a support to our kids, however the performance or the competition went.
Mhm.
And really, that will allow them to take the time and space they need and share their experience of what happened after a little bit of time. We don't want to jump in there with, well, you should have done this, you could have done that, that kind of thing. A little bit of that, if they ask for it down the line, totally cool, you know? But really, we want to create space for our kids to be able to share their feelings with us. So that might mean some quiet time in the car on the ride home. That might be, hey, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. And then it's really striking to me how many kids do take their parents up on that offer when that space is created and it's there without like a checklist of what should be done differently next time. And oh, well, that didn't go very well. And then the other thing that's really, really important is encouraging our kids to not just focus on what went wrong, but rather to try to jot down a couple things that went well, either in the competition itself or related around the competition, that sort of thing. So those are some of the key points that I would share. And those are some of the main things that I often talk with parents about, particularly parents who really have that impulse because I mean, we all have it. I have it too, want to jump in there and fix the thing that went wrong or, protect our kids from their feelings when things do go wrong. It's brutal, right? I mean, I have that every single day myself. I have 18-year-old twin boys and these things come up, right? But that
Yeah.
space is really important, that ability to um, connect on an authentic human level and in time, not be afraid to share the challenges that we've had, maybe in sports or in life, and how we've navigated, keeping in mind it's going to look different for our kid. But just that understanding that we've struggled too is very, very powerful for our kids.
I had to chuckle when you said the quiet time, because there's been road trips when we've been at a really big event and it didn't go well. And you have 8 hours home and there's not a whole lot of talking going on.
Oh,
8 hours might be a little bit long for the quiet time.
might be a little bit excessive, but yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's great advice. And yeah, and I think too, as parents, And I think especially as rodeo parents, like we have a lot of money invested in horses and trailers and time invested in practice. And so a lot of parents, there's a lot of pressure on those kids to
Mhm.
go out and really to perform. And a lot of parents, no matter what the sport, they're living vicariously through their kids. And unfortunately, that puts even more pressure on the kids. So I think just, a reminder of the perspective and, you know, keeping your cool and walking away as a parent, if it is really challenging and positive things can't be said. So it doesn't mean that life is all rainbows and fairy dust. But, is that performance and that competition and your reaction, are you going to say something that's going to ruin your relationship, and so it's pretty hard when you got some pretty competitive people in the family, um to manage that and manage, the other parents' reactions as well. So I think
100%. It's all very real, right? And yeah, we're certainly not trying to negate the reality of challenge because challenge is real. We're going to all face it every day, competition, outside of competition, all of it. But it's that perspective and awareness and really for us as parents shining that light on, okay, how do we want to show up here? What
Mhm.
are the variables that could impact how we show up, and how can we manage those within ourselves and show up the way that we want to, in a way that's going to support our kids as opposed to you know do the opposite of that.
Mhm. Because at the end of the day, it's about building great kids.
Right.
It's really not about, you know, I mean, yeah, it'd be great if it's national championships and all that kind of stuff. But honestly, the end of the day, it's we want to build great human beings to leave this, when we leave this earth, we've left great human beings to take our place. And that's the ultimate goal, I feel like.
100%. Yeah. And when we're really dialed in and have an awareness of what we need as parents to optimize our own sense of well-being, our own ability to show up in this way that we've just discussed, we're modeling that for our kids and we're helping them to integrate some of those same qualities.
Mhm.
I think that's a great starting point for people to be able to take inventory of what their goals are and who they want to be. How do I want to show up, or who do I want to show up as a parent? Who do I want to show up as whatever profession as an athletic trainer, as a physical therapist, as a competitor. I think that's just a very good way to take inventory and really think about who you want to be in those moments.
100% exactly. And that sense of self-awareness is so vital, right? And oftentimes it's not that we're not aware, but we're moving so fast through life that we just don't think about it, right? And we just sort of are more in that reactive space as opposed to the responding space. And so that's a really good point that you make.
Mhm.
You talked about, I mean, comparison is the thief of joy. And
Mhm.
so how do people, it's really easy to look to your left, look to your right, wonder why this person has this and you don't, or wonder why they're able to do this and you can't, and really just like stay in your own lane and focus on you and play to your strengths. I know that that's kind of a point that you make in your teaching is being able to play to your own strengths. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's such an important point because we want, as parents, to be aware of our context, aware of our strengths, what we're bringing to the table, and focusing on those to help us navigate challenge. And we want to be teaching our kids to do the same thing. And it's so, so hard out there these days because comparison is something that happens, it's almost like natural. But we want to reinforce for our kids the importance of first focusing on what they're bringing to the mix, what they're bringing to the table, and helping them to see their strengths alongside of, what the challenges might be, because we can't negate those challenges. But oftentimes when our kids are having challenges, even when we're having challenges, it's hard to focus on the strengths, right? And so we really want to make a point of doing that with our kids from a very early age, and helping reinforce for them that, what they're seeing out there on social media isn't always real, and the real negative impact that can come from really wanting to be like other people, because that's the thing that makes us feel whole. That's a piece that over time we want to try to dismantle with our kids. And I'll give you an example. So I grew up with this medical condition, hydrocephalus, and I couldn't play contact sports. So that was out. It was really, really a great thing that my parents were able to do. They were able to help me focus on what I could do as opposed to what I couldn't do. And so over a little bit of time, really early on, I gravitated towards tennis. And that became a big piece of my identity. I was a tennis player, but there's my context. I wasn't the best. I rarely won the first place trophy. I won a bunch of runner-up trophies, but sometimes I didn't win any trophy, right? But I really was playing from the inside out because I loved it. And, of course, there's going to be that tinge of disappointment when you lose a match that maybe you thought you were going to win or what have you. So managing all that is important. Again, not sunshine and rainbows. The challenges are real. But I was really able to, and, this may have been because of all the time in and out of the hospital, but it might have also been through the conversations, through the reinforcement from my parents and coaches and stuff like that, that, as long as you're out there doing your best, the outcome is going to be what the outcome is. And helping kids, it's not a button that we can push, but helping kids to internalize that message over time by really focusing in on intentionally, well, what are some of the things that did go well out there on the court, even though you didn't win the match? What are some of the things that did go well out there in the ring when you were roping the calf, even though the barrel got tipped over? These things. Um, Really important to try to address both sides of that coin as a way of helping folks to appreciate what they're bringing to the mix. And then that helps guard against some, if not all, of the comparison over time.
I think we've talked about it before on here, like linking your confidence to your effort instead of your confidence to the results, because you don't always have control over the results, but you have control over your effort. And so, like, did you give the effort in the practice? Did you give the effort in the actual competition? Did you do everything that was within your control to do? And have that be like, okay, I left it all out there. I didn't hold anything back. And instead of linking it to the results, I think that's really important for us to think of as competitors, to think of as parents. So, was the effort there for sure? And one other thing that I want to touch on too, like in you being a parent of twin 18-year-old boys, is that what you said? Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I have a senior as well. And now like we're going into basketball season. She's a senior, and we've talked a lot about her leadership on the team. And when things don't go well, like trying to help the kids that are struggling mentally, that are beating themselves up. Do you discuss that? Like, how do they become leaders within their community? Do you have some advice for parents on nurturing that quality as well?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And, I think some of that comes from kind of natural inclination of the child. But I mean, for example, uh, my son is captain of the crew team, and we talk about this very issue all the time, right? And it's really kind of, and anyone, they don't have to be captain, they can just be a senior on the team,
Mhm.
but to encourage them to really not be afraid to communicate with their teammates about these very issues that we're talking about. Like, hey guys, let's figure out what it looks like to do our best as a team out there on the court tonight. What does it look like to be at our best in the boat at the next regatta? And how can we come together as a team, as a boat, and foster what that's going to look like? And how can we put that together, guys? And really helping to reinforce that it's what we're putting out on the court in the race that day. And as long as we're leaving it all out there, we're doing our very best, we're working together as a unit, whatever that looks like for us, those are the important pieces. And leadership on a team, I believe, and we talk about this a lot here as well, also is helping kids who might be struggling, maybe with an injury or a confidence issue, something along those lines. But I'll use an injury as an example. Are there ways that you can talk to that teammate, you know, suggest things that maybe they can do while they're injured to stay connected to the team, to um, be a contributor in an important way, sort of help them to redefine their role, so to speak. Um, so those are all really important things that our kids can be doing to foster their own sense of leadership on the team. And we can be helping them to think about the ways that they can foster their leadership on the team in discussion at home, at dinner, or, just brainstorming. And again, they have to be open to it.
Mhm.
Um, but sounds like your daughter is open to it, and is an important member of that basketball team, and our son is as well with the crew team. So those are some suggestions I would have.
Yeah, because it's easy to lay blame on other teammates when things aren't going well, but a true leader is going to help bring those other teammates up to where, like let's do whatever we can
100%.
do to
100%.
to get everybody better instead of, blaming a few people for what isn't going right.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we can never, yeah, just sort of having those discussions about the impact of that type of blaming, and that's definitely not going to build a team up. It's going to bring a team down. So, excellent point.
I think that that's such an interesting point about the injured athlete because I mean that's what I deal with full time, and a lot of the time, those kids will somewhat isolate themselves from the team no matter what you do. And we try to keep them involved in the weight room, making sure that they're going to weights and doing what they can around the injury that they have. But community, I think, is such an overlooked component of helping an athlete recover from an injury, whether it's community from the parents, their teammates, their coaches, and them feeling like they still care about them even though they're injured, rather than just throwing them to the side because they can't be useful to the team on the court. And so, we deal with that a lot. And again, being that level part of their life that doesn't get too high or too low for them, and you're just kind of that safe place for them when they come to you with their issues, whether it be injury or, man, I'm really struggling mentally because I'm not playing. That's a really important part of our job as healthcare professionals, is just like being that level place for athletes and not being an extension of the elevation of the team or the coach or the game or whatever it is.
100%. Absolutely. To leave that space open for them to share how they're feeling emotionally and physically about the injury, and about how it's shifted their identity on the team, and also helping them again to mm, be a part of the team from a different angle and reinforcing the idea that there are lots of different ways that we can contribute. And not that that's easy at all, because you've got an athlete whose identity is built around being, a central player on the basketball team or in a boat or what have you. It's not easy, but it's a reality that these injuries happen, right? And so to find a way to help a kid, an athlete, build a new sense of normal within their context of injury, you know, and helping them to understand it's not going to be forever, and helping them focus on what they can do to recover at the same time is a really important angle to take.
Yeah, Becky and I have talked about this before on here. Is it's you have to be really careful how you speak to people about their injury and make it
Mhm.
seem like it is something that they can have hope of coming back from instead of pointing out like like you might file the issues in your head of like, okay, this lacks range of motion, this feels torn and things like that. But when you start throwing too much at them, they kind of just am like, man, I'm really messed up, and how do I ever overcome all of this? And then that can just send them in a spiral. And so just that communication between them. And then, working at the high school level, we see a lot of kids that have never been hurt before. And so they don't have a clue, and their parents have never seen their kid hurt before. I can't imagine what that's like. I mean,
Mhm.
my dog gets hurt and I'm a mess. So, so, um, I think just being there for the community as a whole, the parent, the athlete, the coach, especially if it's a star player, that can really send things into a downward spiral. So, yeah, just very important being a healthcare professional also in um, those situations.
100%. Absolutely.
I also want to touch a little bit on the mental stress that you go through when your horse is injured. So, most of what we deal with is rodeo athletes, rodeo people, equestrians. And I tell you what, when I have had a horse that is sidelined with an injury, I mean, it is devastating, and you really it might almost be worse than with yourself being hurt because you feel like you have less control and you don't know for sure if they're ever going to come back. And, I just encourage people when whether they're injured themselves or their horse, take that time to reflect on
Mhm.
things. There have been moments where I've had an injured horse and I went back and I've watched runs, I've watched competition, and just it's interesting when you like maybe I'm putting together a sale video for a horse, like, and you watch run after run after run, and you're like, oh, I'm seeing common themes there, and so whether that's with an athlete in regular mainstream sports or horse sports, like
Mhm.
after you watch repeated film and repeated things, you're going to see certain consistencies or inconsistencies and things that can be worked on when you are able to get back at it, and ways, whether that's the rider having areas of hey, I always end up getting shifted to the outside in my turn on third barrel, blah blah blah. There's different things that you can notice. So if you can take that time to, just study what's been going on, work on your mental game while you are sidelined. Those are all great ways. Work on the muscles that aren't injured. If you have a knee injury on your left, it doesn't mean you can't work on your right and your core and your arms. There's things that you can do while you're sidelined so that you can feel productive and feel, and like you said, be supportive of the team in ways that, aren't necessarily physically out there on the court, but that'll help your mental aspect and it'll help you once you get back in the game as well.
100%. Yeah, I agree with everything that you just said. And I I feel that whole piece about the horse being injured, and that because I'm a dog lover, and I have you know, whole history with my dogs, and but
Mhm.
it feels like there's a parallel there, right? If a dog is sick or injured in some way or has a bad leg, yeah, it just it's crushing and devastating. And right, there's that lack of control piece because our animals can't talk to us,
Mhm.
but yet, oh yeah, anyway. So and then it's so hard, but then what, as your horse is healing, can you be doing as a rider to sort of facilitate and get, and the studying and all of these things, so vital. It's kind
Mhm.
of like, again, taking that other angle to maximize within the context. But
Absolutely.
Well, so like kids when they're younger, it they really take to heart what they're told. And so if they're told like, hey, you can't do this or you'll never be able to reach the pro level or whatever it is, eventually they start to believe that. And I've seen the kids and even myself who have been told certain things along the way that maybe aren't necessarily true. And so how do you help people find a new identity? Because if you come from a certain situation and you're told certain things your whole life, you start to believe it and it starts to become your identity. So how do you help people break those patterns?
yeah, that's a great question, and it's true, right? If we are giving our kids the message, well, you can't do this or you'll never be that, it does, it sticks, and it becomes part of one's identity. So it's a process. There's not a really a one size fits all, but it's really sitting down with someone and helping them to understand themselves within their context, in terms of what they're bringing to the table, bringing to the mix, regardless of what others have told them and reinforced, and trying to break that down over time. It's kind of a process, um, helping them to reframe certain experiences, look at things a little bit differently, and just uncover perhaps what have become hidden strengths or hidden aspects of their identity because they were hearing for so long that X, Y, or Z would never happen, that kind of a thing. So it's a process of exploration and discovery and building that awareness.
Talk about your new book, Step Away. What inspired you to write that, and kind of what are some of the main points in that book?
Yeah, so Step Away is a book for parents, really focused on how we as parents can optimize our own sense of well being within our own unique context, build certain core aspects of a resilient lifestyle such that we're, in essence, modeling these things for our kids. So that's kind of the other hope for the book, is that we're going to be able to model these things for our kids, help them build the same things that we're building through the book. But was really inspired to write it for a couple of different reasons. Um, Parents are stressed. The Surgeon General put out a report about a year ago, really highlighting the level of stress of parents these days. So there was that, but there's also my work, what I'm seeing day to day with parents who are juggling home life, work life, corporate entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. And these are the factors that really cause, and then of course my own experience as a parent for the past 18 years. So bringing those kind of things together uh, really led me to write the book, and I'm hopeful that it helps a lot of people.
Yeah, I read something just today that stress will kill you a lot quicker than candles on your cake. And, it really, it really will shorten up your life quick. And, a lot of it just starts with how you start your day, your first thought when your feet hit the ground. So, what is kind of one of the number one barrier that you've seen that prevents people from having peace and living a happy life and being their best?
Yeah, it's really comes down to, I mean, you mentioned sort of the first thought as you hit the ground. And for people who are feeling super stressed, they really aren't really thinking about hitting the ground with a calm, peaceful mind. They're thinking about that thing that they have to do and all of the inputs that are coming at them and just moving through those without really thinking about, hmm, maybe if I took a step back and I slowed down and I kind of contended with these things one at a time or from different angles, it would help me kind of create that modulated level baseline. So it's really helpful for folks to have a routine first thing in the morning, whether that's a little bit of meditation time, journaling, exercise. There's not a one size fits all, but having some strategy first thing in the morning to ground you and help you start and move forward from there is really vital.
I agree. I'm always more comfortable in a routine and know that, you know, whether even if it's my routine before roping, before going to work, before working on somebody, I mean, just having that routine to get you in the flow of things is so very important. We talk about even with our horses, we go somewhere new and we have a younger horse. It's important to keep them in the same routine of this is how we warm up, this is how we put our boots on and all that other stuff so they find comfort just in that routine and then the rest comes seems to come more naturally.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And it's very similar to like a pregame routine, right?
Yeah.
Or any sort of a routine. And that I find, you know, not it doesn't have to be a rigid, structured thing, but just some sort of a routine or set of steps that you engage in the morning to get you grounded to start your day off in a level kind of peaceful way, regardless of what's coming up, will really help you to manage through and beyond the inevitable challenges that you'll hit during the day, because we all hit challenges every single day.
And what happens if something is if a wrench is thrown into your routine? What do you do?
Yeah, and so when we're practicing a stress modulated state consistently, and that's kind of becoming a piece of our baseline, it's going to be much easier to pivot and shift gears when necessary when that wrench comes up, because that's going to happen too, right? What we don't want to have happen is for that wrench to cause us to escalate to the point of shutdown, and then it's not going to be helpful to anybody. But if we're practicing consistently modulating our stress response, creating that level baseline for ourselves, we're going to be able to manage wrenches as they come up.
What do you see as the main difference between how somebody who is at the top of the game versus somebody who's, about average? What in their level of thinking have you seen is the main factor that separates them from the rest of the pack?
Yes, that's a really good question. And so it's really that creation of the level baseline is really, really important. So they're focused on that, but they're also really focused on and aware of what do they need to be at their optimal within their own unique context. And for some people, that might mean more sleep. For some, it might mean a certain way of eating or an approach to nutrition. Some people might thrive on calm, mindful exercise, such as yoga or that sort of thing, whereas other people might need to go for a, high intensity run, or some people might thrive on social connection or engaging in some sort of a hobby or thing that they love, at least once a week, maybe once a day. people who are able to experience joy. And it sounds very simple, but oftentimes we're moving through life so fast that we forget to laugh, we forget to notice those things that make us happy, that bring us a moment or more than a moment of joy at points. So it's people who are sort of focused on what they need within their own unique context to be at their optimal, whatever that looks like for them, is really the thing that I find separates the pack.
I know we're talking about parenting and how to deal with kids and athletes and competitors, but I was just thinking there's so many parallels to this in life and business, because
Mm-hmm.
really when we are running our businesses, it is kind of like a game. I mean, the more reps you get, the better you're going to be at your business. And same thing, like you have to be so mentally resilient
Mm-hmm.
in order to be successful at business. And so it's I really hope that people can apply these techniques, these philosophies, not only to their parenting skills, their competition skills, but also business aspects as well. So I really appreciate your insight on these things. If someone is wanting to get your book, where both books, you have two books. One of them
Mm-hmm.
is called Bounce, and the other one is Step Away. Where would they find your books, Dr. Kate?
Yeah, so that would be on Amazon or my website, which is www.katelundspeaks.com.
All
And
right.
you also do speaking at events and for like corporate things and stuff of that nature as well, right?
Exactly. Yes, yes, I
Right.
do.
And they can book that on your website.
Yes, precisely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Anything else you would like people to know either about your philosophy or just a certain piece of advice that everyone should know?
Yeah, well, one quick thing. I love what you said, Becky, about the strategies and tools that we've talked about here applying across domains because that's spot on. And that's the sort of the big idea with um the things I write in both of my books. It all applies to all of us across domains. So great point there. Thanks for bringing that up. And then just finally, I want to just leave folks with this idea of always focusing on possibility on the other side of the challenges for both yourselves and for your kids.
Mhm. Amen. And that's how we grow. Those challenges, we have to be grateful for the challenges because that is what's going to push us to grow to the next level. So um sometimes it's really hard when you're in the midst of it to be thankful for that, but you've survived 100% of those bad days and you will get better, you will get stronger from it. And so embrace it. Thank God for those days. And then thank God for when you get through them too. For sure.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think a lot of people they either think they can't do something or they fear something because they don't know what could happen, and it keeps them from taking that next step a lot of the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. We sure appreciate your expertise and for you taking the time to sit down and visit with us about this stuff. If anyone wants to find her book, again, Step Away and Bounce, they're on Amazon or go to her website. And as always, thank you for listening and let your health be the pivot point to your success.